And I'm just going to make this pretty brief because I kind of want to focus on what I did more this summer. So this is just a quick overview of what I wanted to get down to. And basically the premise is just to show that all these retrofit projects are inspired by the Sustainable Development Goals. So that is a very multifaceted approach. We can't only be fixing homes while ignoring the well-being of the community or the environmental sustainability of them. And the things that I wanted to take away is that the preferred approach of students and what they want to do with their volunteering and how that correlates with the SDGs. So I won't be going into the SDG framework in depth, but essentially the SDGs could act as an assessment framework to help plan what local student career opportunities will look like. While they are big picture topics, they have also been conducted on a local scale. And this is a great trade-off then, because students are always wanting more experience. So why don't we give them options to retrofit houses in Kingston while working towards the SDGs in the community that has already given us so much. However, a lot of questions arise in that process. For instance, what do the students expect? What are the opportunities exactly? What experience would they find useful? Can we get them talking to high schools? And here we hope to answer some of these questions with some surveying. So I was tasked with the surveying and I worked with the Earth Center, QBAC, Greenovation, Squash, and other members of the coalition, the environmental coalition that I had initiated at Queen's with my boss to promote the survey and increase student engagement. Social media accounts were used to collect data to gain a better understanding of what the students can expect. In total, we had over 160 engagements with this survey. The Green Center, Greenovation, Squash, ASS, the AMS, Queen Sustainable Fashion, and several other conservation-based groups shared the surveys to their stories to gain as much engagement as possible. Out of these groups, 100% voted that they would likely be interested in volunteering locally, specifically in Kingston. 91% voted yes when they were asked if they were looking to build up the volunteer section of their resume. When asked how many hours they were willing to volunteer, 81% voted 1 to 3 hours a week, 15% voted 3 to 6 hours a week, and 0.03% voted 7 to 10 hours a week. And I think I'll break this down a bit later. 10% of the surveyed population had experience in retrofitting homes, 70% had experience in discussing sustainability with high school students, and 100% were interested in the SDGs. And there's also a short answer segment of the survey. It is important to note that there was approximately half the engagement in this portion of the survey. However, it is still important to make note of all of the results. So when asked what the Sustainable Development Goals were and how well they were covered within the Queen's curriculum, the majority answered with topics like zero hunger, gender equality, and sustainable energy, which is great for retrofits. When asked what volunteer opportunities students were looking for, the majority answered with anything to do with sustainability-based ones. And when asked what courses have ready the students to volunteer towards the SDGs, many answered with environmental toxicology, environmental and sustainability, environmental biology-based courses, fisheries, animal physiology, limnology, diversity of life, and environmental geology courses. So I found the results very intriguing, and I thought there was a lot to take away. So clearly everybody wants to help the Kingston community and better that bond between Queen students and the wonderful city of Kingston, which was so lovely to hear. 91%, so the majority were interested in gaining more volunteer experience. And I think this is not 100% because students prefer to have paid work experience on their resume. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that students with less means that don't have the opportunity to spend time volunteering, that maybe need to pay for their entire tuition, don't have the luxury to answer things like I can contribute 7 to 10 hours when they're working a full-time job and a full-time student. So a lot of people said that they would give 81% of their time 1 to 3 hours a week, and only not even 1% were interested in 7 to 10 hours. So I think what I've taken from this is if we can offer some sort of incentive, such as grants or slightly paid positions, this could increase that value by a lot, because to retrofit and train students to retrofit housing will take more than 3 to 10 hours a week in the beginning, at least. A very small percentage said they had experience in retrofitting homes, which was to be expected. However, I don't think people realize what retrofitting homes entirely is. And maybe they were forgetting that it can be as simple as changing your light bulbs to LEDs or fixing water or air leaks. As far as I know, there isn't a substantial amount of courses at Queen's that offer retrofitting home opportunities. So it is fantastic that students are experienced in it at all. Not surprisingly, a majority of students involved with environmental clubs have experience with community outreach, and this is because a lot of clubs have community outreach chairs that delegate and send out volunteers to educate local schools on associated topics. Still, I found it was very helpful to know that this is a common thing for students to partake in. And finally, out of the multiple choice portion of the survey, everyone was interested in sustainable development goals, which is fantastic because the proposed positions will be right up their alley. I also found the short answer results very helpful. They displayed that any volunteer options are valuable because experience is the biggest currency in university, but a lot of the surveyed population agree that sustainable based opportunities are ideal. And the survey also made it clear that environmentally based courses are very much considered SDG based courses, as they will most likely mention the climate change and disproportionate effects it has on different communities. Thus, we might as well advertise them as SDG courses that they are. We're all working towards the same goal here. So I was lucky enough to work under Molly Urquhart. She was the Commissioner of Environmental Sustainability and I was her deputy. And I was in charge of assisting coalition meetings, which is what we had started together. So I had to contact environmental heads and we would have tons of heads join us. And the whole point of this was to share our audience, because with COVID, we had all lost a big portion of our audience when it came to fundraising. So we all saw a huge decrease in the amount of engagement we were getting. And we figured we all have an audience with the same sort of interest. So why not share within the same coalition what we're up to? And that way also we can make sure we're not doubling over events or just adding onto each other so that we can get a better engagement. And that was perfect for me because it was really easy to advocate for these surveys within this coalition. So one of the main engagements I received was from Greennovations, who are a retrofitting group at Queen's, and they actually provide retrofit kits to students already. So I attached their information here. I also attached Squash, which work on green spaces at Queen's, and they want to expand eventually to retrofitting. The Commissioner of Environmental Sustainability is obviously interested in this as she works in the coalition. I believe might be a he now. And the Earth Center is also very experienced in sustainability-based education, specifically in high schools. I used to manage the Earth Center. So this is a great sign, as we can see, the common theme of community outreach amongst all the clubs. So yeah, for example, this is one of the clubs at Queen's, and these are some of the retrofit packages and information that they provide to their community. So this is kind of something that I was collaborating with them on, and I think it's pretty nifty if you ask me. So next steps, this was my next steps last year, was I wanted to continue surveying, and I wanted to make sure that we could start a launch of some sort of group that people could add on to. And that's exactly what we did this summer. So this is the official page, Instagram page. We also have a Facebook, Twitter, and email. And it was named by Warren Mabey, my boss, Queen's Sustainability Volunteers, or QSV. You can see we have 119 followers already, 14 posts. I tried to, as of now, I'm trying to get into the hiring process of things. So I post educational tips every week, kind of like a fun fact Friday. And then I add information about what kind of jobs that we're going to be offering. But something that I'm really pushing for is, again, to have some sort of paid incentive or position for students who have less luxury or privilege and need to pay for more of their school. So that pretty much sums it up, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts or questions, comments, concerns, because this is a very collaborative project, if you couldn't tell, and I love advice and tips, especially from people with a lot of experience. So feel free to jump on in. I'm Natasha.
I want to know, Mckenzie, when I heard you speak last year, it was all sort of the beginning stages. Have the students actually started to do the retrofitting?
So currently we are in the beginning phases of the soft launch. We cannot get the students retrofitting until we get the underground network out there. So I met with Sustainable Kingston, and they educated me on what type of retrofits exactly we will be doing. To do any of these retrofits, it requires, oh, very cute cat. It requires a lot of training. You can't just send people out to install light bulbs. You actually have to have, liability and waivers signed and everything. So before we even get students signed up, which we have that in the process, that's step number one. Now we need to see exactly what each student will be doing. My plan is to have a chair of people. So there will be head managers who kind of are trained to do blower door installations and all of the advanced stuff. And they go in with their teams and they install the stuff together. And then we'll have outreach, fundraising chairs, operations and etc. But to do that, we have to do quite a bit more planning. So I do hope that it's moved a lot more along the process by the end of this year, but it is a bit tricky to get going because there's a lot of steps that you forget about when you start a project like this.
Kenzie, I have another question. You mentioned that there would be an incentive, monetary incentive for students who are sort of in need, but who would love to do it. What's the sort of magnitude of incentives that we're thinking about, and how do you envisage that playing out?
Right. So I used to work for the AMS in that position. That year they created an environmental or ecological grant, which can be up to, I believe, $5,000. But they allocate it to different groups. So you probably can't get the $5,000 at the time. I am in the process of applying for this, in contact with the AMS, because I figure if I can apply for this and get the incentive, then I can give the funds to Warren, and then he can allocate them between the head managers who would have extra training. And then I would hope to give those head managers kind of a chance to explain their adversity that they face from, having less means in university, because I've come across a lot of students who are brilliant and have to turn opportunities down because they have to work full time. So having a grant like that can even provide, okay, well, I can at least contribute an extra 2 hours per week because 1 to 3 hours is just not a lot to get things going. So we do need a bit more commitment, but that's the kind of incentive I'm looking at now. I am pushing for the professors to use Queen's funds, but I don't know how that works. So again, bottom of the totem pole here, trying to get money. So we'll see.